And so they scratching their heads, and then finally they asked the forester at the university, and he said, I was wondering when you would come and see me. He says, those people, when they planned that hall 300 years ago, they knew that these beams would eventually need to be replaced. So they planted a grove of those trees over here, and they are now 300 years old, and they are ready, so you cut them down and make your beams. Now talk about planning ahead. I mean, that just blew my mind, you know. Now I wonder, and it didn't say in the report, that they plant another grove of trees for the next 300 years, you know. That would be a good question. So now the other thing is Jules Verne in French. He was so accurate in predicting the future that his book, The Voyage to the Moon, he had the correct size of space capsule, the launch site in Florida, the length of the voyage was correct, the number of astronauts, weightlessness in space, and the splashdown in the ocean. Amazing. The only thing he got wrong is he thought the fuel was gunpowder. Instead, it's, you know, our modern like liquid fuels and solid fuels. But then the amazing thing, I'm sure you've never heard of this, he wrote a book called Paris in the 20th Century back in 1863 during our Civil War. And it was found by his great-grandson locked away and 130 years later in 1994. And it talked about glass skyscrapers, air conditioning, TV, elevators, high-speed trains, gasoline-powered cars, fax machines, and even internet-like systems. So, you know, that's pretty incredible. So some people have an uncanny knack of predicting the future. But then there's like the Lensman series by Doc Smith. He completely missed the computer revolution. He's talking about these. How many have heard of the Lensman series? Anybody? I really enjoyed that book years ago. It's actually 6 books. But what happened is he's got like this guy out somewhere in the galaxy with hyperdrive broken down, and he's fixing it, and his arms all greasy from it. And then when he's got it fixed, he suddenly he needs to calculate his next jump through hyperspace, and he gets out his slipstick, his slide rule. And within 10 years, no one would ever use a slide rule again because of calculators. He completely, you know, missed that. And so how much are we missing in terms of the future, you know? But he did foresee some interesting things because he talked about the powers of the human mind, how it would grow, and that there would be, he's talking about these space wars with mental powers, and then they talk about, well, there was this one planet that was so far ahead of everybody, but the problem is nobody could get to it because anytime you'd think of going there, those people would make you forget. And so you would never, you know, so you wouldn't even have a war with them because you wouldn't even know they were there, you know. And so they said, well, what kind of technology do they have? Well, he says, they don't need technology. They do everything with the power of their minds. And that's what I want to mention, too, about, you know, the ancient civilizations spoke a lot about that capability. And but now there's also, you might want to, if you get a chance, read about the galactic civilization based on physics, on the consumption of energy. I'm running low on time, unfortunately. Get too much into all this. They're the type 1 to 3. We're about 0.7. We're not there yet, you know. But you know, hand labor, industrial society, you know, gradually with type 1 is global, planetary. It's kind of like Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon. Then you get the type 2, which is stellar, consuming all the power of the sun and the Star Trek's United Federation of Planets before warp drive. Then you get the type 3, which is galactic, billions of stars, like the Star Wars Empire or the Star Trek's Borg. And then Michio Kaku mentioned a type 4, which would be extragalactic, kind of like the godlike hue of Star Trek. So that's the way science is looking ahead. And that's one way of looking at things, but we're ignoring a lot of like the spiritual aspect of our lives. How is that going to change? You know, so Goethe was the last Renaissance man, and he made original contributions in all the different fields, art and science and literature. But Einstein, when he started his work in physics, he had read everything there was to know in physics, but by the end of his life, he couldn't even keep up in his own field of relativity. And so it's really impossible to be a Renaissance man today. But the thing is, you need to come up with meaning. Life has to have meaning. You can't just live by saying, oh, these are the facts, and you don't interpret them. Of course you have to interpret them. And Ortega y Gasset's one of my favorite historians, philosophers from Spain, and his book Man in Crisis is remarkable. Now, the ancient civilizations have a complete scenario of the future, and I would like to say a few things about it, but one of the things that's important is there's a book that came out, Biocentrism, and just recently in the last couple of years, and he talks about having to realize that we talk about still with atheistic materialism of science, when quantum mechanics has changed all that. We already know now that you can't say anymore that the Big Bang happened, then you have the galaxies and planets, and then suddenly consciousness appeared by accident. No, because quantum mechanics tells you that the observer is primary. All of things in nature, all the particles, are probabilistic wave functions. They're just probabilistic waves. They're not anywhere in particular. So this whole universe is nothing until there's an observer, and then the wave function collapses into a real particle, into something real. And so we keep ignoring that, and yet it's been proven over and over. So consciousness comes first. So if consciousness, first there was consciousness, then there was the Big Bang. It's the other way around. So now we have to realize that like chi, the energy, and all the spiritual kind of things we talk about are really first, and then comes matter. Even in physics, energy is primary now, really, over matter. So we need to look deeper. We're trapped in our mind, and even the great breakthroughs in science come through the intuition. They don't, you have to think, but then you have to go, you have this breakthrough which comes from beyond the mind. Hamlet's Mill, a remarkable book written actually back in the 60s, talks about 30 ancient civilizations, and they all speak of the precession of the equinox, this 24,000-year cycle, and all of them, whether in Europe, Asia, the New World, they all talked about that this affected the rise and fall of the ages over 24,000 years. Walter, who spoke here before, mentioned like a patient with amnesia. Mankind has forgotten this past, making it almost impossible to plan for the future. So, we can't be focused on all the mechanical things. We need to go deeper. And the reality of like Hamlet's Mill, that book, archaeoastronomy, is finally being recognized, and they're realizing, okay, like in the Yajurveda here, the Pleiades at winter solstice, that would place it at 8,500 BC. That's completely different from our usual linear timeline. So we need to really rewrite history. And here's just a little thing. You can look this up, and you can listen to Walter's talk or my older talk, Inside Edge, but about the cycle and how it affects us. And it gives especially in India, they have a complete plan of how this whole world is going to change over time in the next few thousand years. And with a lot of, and the whole thing is so accurate, step by step. It's just amazing to me. And just to make it more valid, that they had higher technologies in the old days, like the chemical fertilizers we use for agriculture right now, the ancients used magnetic fields of the earth to increase crop yields. And we're just starting to do that now. A Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty by Robert Burke, he says that he used a flux magnetometer and looked at the old ruins and found out that indeed, they built on all these geomagnetic anomalies where all these things were happening, and then enhanced it by placing the stones in a certain way. And the stones were like metallic kind of stones that would conduct that electricity. So, and that started to disappear around 1400 BC in a lot of places, but it was worldwide. So, and then you look at Tollance's Egyptian pyramids. To me, that's, as an engineer, it's kind of amazing. Like Indiana, the limestone quarries for our buildings worldwide are only a 1/4 inch. The Egyptian pyramids, they had tolerances of 10,000ths of an inch. So we need to take some of these things seriously. I spoke about respirocytes. That's one of the things that's coming. And that's artificial blood cells that we're working on that hold 234 times the amount of oxygen or CO2 in the blood. And the idea is to replace 10% of our blood with respirocytes. And that means you can hold your breath for 4 hours. And so, like, say you have a heart attack. I spoke about this last time, but it's just incredible. You have a heart attack. You call the hospital, tell them, look, my heart stopped. I'm going to be over there in a little while. I'm going to stop off at the bar and have a drink because it's kind of upsetting me, And but I'll be over there in a couple of hours just to have everything ready. No problem. Or you go scuba diving, you hold your breath for 4 hours. And you don't get the bends because they can have the respirocytes tuned so that they control the nitrogen buildup. So that would not be a problem anymore.